Hey, good day, and welcome back to another episode of the ADHDads. I'm your host, JJ.
And I am running close to fashionably late, but I'm your host, CJ.
And today we have a special guest, Dr. Carey Heller, on to discuss ADHD evaluations, executive dysfunction, and treatments and strategy. Dr. Carey Heller is a licensed psychologist and founding partner of Heller Psychology Group, located in Bethesda, Maryland. He specializes in the evaluation and treatment of attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADHD, executive function issues, learning disabilities, and related items, including anxiety. Dr. Heller, welcome to the ADHDads.
It's great to be here. Thanks a lot for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, man, we are really looking forward to this conversation, too. I was just telling you before we press record, our listeners know that I've been going along the ADHD evaluation, and that was one of actually our biggest episodes was talking about that process. And we'll probably be releasing my part two to that. With the official diagnosis and talking about that in the episode before you. So this will go really good together, and I think will be a really great benefit to our listeners and anyone else that's kind of going along that process with you. So thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Heller.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Happy to do it.
Yeah, one thing I'd just like to get to know a little bit about you before we dive into some of our questions, just to kind of get an understanding of what got you to where you are in pursuing psychology, and just what your overall life looks like leading up to today.
Sure. I've actually been interested in being a psychologist since middle school.
Wow, okay.
My focus has changed a lot. My initial interest in the field had just been like seeing how terribly kids treat each other at the middle school age. Bullying, things like that, just got me interested in the idea of the field in the first place. And then, some internships and other stuff, got me interested in learning more about ADHD and other issues. And then, working so much with kids, ADHD is such a common issue, with kids, that just seeing sort of how much it manifests, that but also at the same time, it then obviously it doesn't just magically disappear in most cases. Sort of when you get to become adulthood, contrary to what they used to think more. So I think I also work with a fair amount with adults too, just because I think it's usually a lifelong thing that I think can be managed very well with the right supports. But you have to understand, what are you dealing with in the first place, and then from there targeting a variety of strategy and different interventions, formal and informal, in order to cope effectively and thrive in life.
That's interesting that you say that, because I think I had the adult ADHD versus the kids. I think when I first started kind of digesting a lot of this information, it does seem like an adolescent problem that's like, what happens to it once you grow up? Where does it go? Or what, you just learn these techniques to cope with it as you get older? Or where does the ADHD go? And now here I am, 36, and have just been diagnosed with ADHD, and it's like, well, where do I start? A lot of this seems like a lot of behavioral modification and therapy and tactics, and where do I do at 36? So that's interesting to hear. I'd like to dive into that a little bit more, but before we do, I want to ask, like, has this disorder manifested itself in your life in any way, in your personal life? Why ADHD specifically, and has that piqued your interest?
I don't know. Certainly I know a lot of people with it. I think I don't know. I think it's just in a lot of different ways. I think both personal as well as in, other circumstances as well. I feel like I think it's just something I've seen a lot of, and just, I find really interesting. And just because of the fact that I think in some ways, I think sometimes people discredit thinking, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's, you can't focus. So what, you can cope. But, the reality is that it can, for some people, if it's severe enough and it's not treated, it's sort of life altering in terms of the ability to function in life and be successful and even just cope day to day. If you think about the executive function demands of, as an adult, having to take care of yourself, making sure eating, getting physical activity, even just the basics of paying bills, it can really be detrimental. And so I think just the fact that something that sometimes people discredit as being a big deal, I think is a huge deal if it's not addressed. But at the same time, people have the ability to thrive. But I think that people don't oftentimes realize how to do that. And sometimes the execution is a lot harder than knowing what to do.